For some reason my husband did not like our grandson and I very much, and the grandson felt it, and when my husband was away, he took advantage of the moments when I was asleep. I never planned to grow into a quiet woman. It simply happened, gradually, like the way dust settles in corners you no longer think to clean. Over time, the stillness became its own rhythm, and I learned to live within its margins. Victor and I had been married for over 40 years. In that time, love had faded like a photo left in sunlight. What once felt urgent and bright now seemed fixed in pale tones. He wasn't cruel, just distant. Our words had become functional, our gestures routine. We lived like careful neighbors. Our house, tucked on the edge of a quiet town, remained clean, preserved. I kept it that way. Folded towels with the same precision each morning. Washed the windows every Thursday. Boiled the kettle at 6:45 a.m. sharp. If something held still, I could trust it. Aaron, my grandson, was a disruption I hadn't realized I needed. He arrived just after the semester ended. 20 years old, soft-spoken, observant in that quiet way that makes you feel as if you're constantly being studied. He stood in the doorway taller than I remembered, his bag slung low over one shoulder. His hair was longer now, his voice deeper. Victor barely looked up from the newspaper when Aaron walked in. "You're taller," he muttered. "Guess so," Aaron replied. No embrace. No welcome. Just two generations passing like trains in the fog. I greeted Aaron with a longer look, then stepped forward and hugged him. He hesitated, then tightened his arms around me. His embrace lingered just a breath too long, and when we parted, I found myself brushing invisible lint from my blouse, just to have something to do with my hands. "You'll take the guest room," I said. He nodded and made his way upstairs without another word. Dinner was quiet that night. The kind of quiet where even the sound of utensils on porcelain felt sharp. I asked Aaron about school, about what he was reading. He answered politely, never expanding, never avoiding. His eyes, however, wandered. Victor didn't engage. When he did speak, it was to complain about the back pain he'd had since the cold snap, or the idiocy of the evening news. After the dishes were done, Aaron retreated to his room. Victor stopped me in the hall. "Don't spoil him. Let him learn what quiet means." I didn't respond. There was no point. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Around 1 a.m, I heard soft footsteps cross the hallway. I didn't move, just listened. One slow pass across the old floorboards. Not sneaking, not heavy, just present. The next morning, Victor stood in the doorway of our bedroom, rubbing his shoulder. "Warehouse needs someone. Double shift." For days. He said it like a sentence, like an opportunity to escape. "You shouldn't push yourself," I said. "I know what I'm doing." He packed without urgency, tossed a few shirts into the bag, his toothbrush, an old thermos. Before leaving, he paused at the door. "Don't let him waste electricity. He stays up too late." "He's not a child. He's not a man either," he said. The screen door slammed behind him. Silence settled instantly. I made tea, opened the curtains, let the soft morning light fill the kitchen. Aaron came down a little later, his hair damp from a shower. His shirt clung to him in places. He looked younger, then older, then unreadable. "He left?" he asked. "For days," I replied. He stood in the doorway for a long second, then leaned his shoulder against the frame. "You look tired." I smiled faintly. "That's what every woman loves to hear." "I meant it differently," he said. "I know." He nodded, but his eyes didn't drift like they used to. They stayed, level, curious. I turned to the kettle and waited for it to whistle. It never came. That evening I made a simple dinner. He helped clear the table without being asked. I dried the dishes while he washed. Neither of us spoke much. When I turned, I caught him looking at me, not with discomfort, not with judgment, just a quiet intensity, as if trying to memorize something. "Long day?" I asked. "Not really," he said. But the way he said it felt like it meant more. After he went upstairs, I sat in the living room. The television murmured old reruns, but I wasn't watching. Eventually, I turned it off. The house went still. I climbed the stairs, my hand brushing the rail more slowly than usual. At the top, I paused. His door was slightly open. Light spilled across the floor in a thin line. I hesitated, then moved past it. In my own room, I sat on the edge of the bed, brushing my fingers across the coverlet. Something felt different in the air. I lay down, closed my eyes, and waited for sleep that didn't come. I woke the next morning not to sunlight, but to the quiet presence of another body moving in the house. There was something about the sound of footsteps you could recognize, not by weight or pattern, but by the way they hesitated. Aaron moved differently than Victor. Slower, less functional. As if he was listening to the house as much as walking through it. I stayed in bed longer than usual. Not from tiredness, but from something softer. I wanted to feel the day arrive before I stepped into it. When I came downstairs, he was already in the kitchen. A clean shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, barefoot. He was making eggs. He glanced over his shoulder. "Morning." "Morning," I answered, a little too quietly. "Hope you don't mind." I woke up hungry. Of course not. He cooked like someone who'd learned without asking for help. Precise, calm, unhurried. I poured tea and sat down, feeling the warmth of the cup press into my palms. We ate in silence. But it wasn't cold. After breakfast, I started laundry. He offered to help, but I waved him off. Still, I noticed how often he lingered in the same room. Reading, drinking water, watching the birds outside the window. That afternoon, he asked if I wanted to sit outside. We brought tea to the porch. The weather was kind. Light wind, soft clouds. Nothing dramatic. Just a calm stage for something waiting underneath. "It's quiet here," he said. "You say that like it's a bad thing." "It's not," he replied. "It just makes you hear more." He didn't look at me when he said it. The next evening, I made a light dinner. We opened a bottle of wine, half as a joke. "Just a little," I said. "Victor says it makes people weak." Aaron raised his glass. "Maybe weak is underrated." I laughed more than I should have. My shoulders felt warm. He washed the dishes again. I dried. When he passed me a plate, our fingers touched. Just barely. But his hand didn't retreat as quickly as before. Later, he played music on his phone. Something old and low. Bluesy. He didn't ask me to dance. He just stood near the doorway, swaying slightly. "You used to play this when I was a kid," he said. "Did I?" "Yeah. In the kitchen, mostly." He looked at me then, and the moment stretched. I stood. My breath had gone shallow without my permission. He offered his hand. I didn't take it, but I didn't walk away either. We stood too close for something innocent. Not touching. But something passed between us all the same. I finally pulled back. "We should get some rest." He nodded, but his eyes didn't soften. They held something else now. Something unsaid, but no longer dormant. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the old tick of the hallway clock. The house was warm. Too warm. I opened the window. The breeze on my skin made me realize I'd been holding heat beneath the surface for days. The next day passed slower. He followed my movements more closely. Not intrusively, but intentionally. I changed clothes in my room and for a moment stared at the mirror. I wore a blouse I hadn't touched in years. It wasn't revealing, but it made me feel known. Downstairs, he looked at me longer than he should have. But he didn't say anything. That evening, I was on the phone in the kitchen, speaking with Victor. He sounded tired. "They're keeping me 2 more days," he said. "No one else can cover. Be home Sunday." I murmured something vague. Said everything was fine. What I didn't know was that Aaron was in the hallway, listening. I turned around to find him standing at the edge of the doorframe. He looked calm, but his hands were in his pockets. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes. He'll be back in 2 days." He nodded slowly, held my gaze longer than usual. "Good to know," he said. Then he turned and walked away. That night, I stood at my bedroom window, looking out into the dark. The wind had picked up. The trees moved like they were trying to speak. Something in me shifted, just slightly, and I didn't know what to do with it. By the third morning, something inside me felt swollen, like a bruise you don't remember earning, but ache from every time you breathe. I told myself it was nothing. The warmth, the air, the season. But nothing was still inside me. Not anymore. I moved through the house slower than I usually did. I carried dishes like glass was dangerous. I folded towels twice, even though they were already perfect. I couldn't seem to finish anything. Everything was half thought, half felt. Aaron noticed, but he didn't comment. Instead, he stayed nearby, present, quiet, watching without making me feel watched. When I opened the back door to shake out a blanket, I didn't hear him come up behind me. "Let me help," he said. He took the blanket from my hands. Our fingers brushed. A light touch, but it carried something underneath it, a charge, a hum. He shook out the fabric, then folded it carefully. His arms moved with a kind of grace I wasn't prepared for. I watched him too long. When our eyes met again, he didn't look away. "Thanks," I whispered. "Any time." That evening, he stayed closer. He sat in the kitchen while I cooked, leaned against the counter, arms crossed, eyes following my hands. "You always make everything look easy," he said. "It just comes from repetition." "No," he said. "Not that. It's something else." I didn't ask what he meant. I couldn't. We ate together. The light outside slowly faded. It was one of those dusks that felt too long and too short all at once. I lit a candle, pretending it was just for the atmosphere. He poured us each a small glass of wine. "Red. Soft. To comfort," he said. "To balance," I replied. After dinner, I washed dishes slowly, savoring the silence between us. He dried, passing each plate with care. When he reached for one, our hands touched again. His palm was warm. Mine trembled. Neither of us mentioned it. Later, I passed him in the hallway. It was narrow. The space between us shrank. I turned, half expecting him to move. But he didn't. His shoulder grazed mine. He didn't apologize. And I didn't step away. We stood still for a moment. Closer than we should have. Closer than I had let anyone be in years. His breath was even. Mine was not. Then I turned away. Slowly, intentionally. In my room, I sat on the bed and stared at the dresser mirror. My reflection didn't look afraid or ashamed, only aware of what I was allowing, of what I wasn't stopping. I changed into night clothes slowly. I brushed my hair longer than I needed to. I moved like someone waiting for something they would never admit. I lay down, but I didn't close my eyes. Every creak in the hallway was louder now. Every shift of wood, every sigh of the house was shaped like footsteps. And then I heard them. Real. Barefoot. Unmistakable. They paused outside my door. I held my breath. They didn't enter. Not that night. But they could have. And I wouldn't have stopped them. The next morning, I dressed without thinking. I chose a blouse I hadn't worn in years. Light blue. Soft fabric. Nothing revealing. But it felt different on my skin. More intimate. When I came down the stairs, Aaron was already at the kitchen table reading. He looked up, then looked again. His gaze didn't linger out of politeness. It lingered out of recognition. He said nothing, but I felt the moment stretch. I busied myself with breakfast. My hands shook while I cracked the eggs. He got up and stood behind me to grab a plate from the cupboard. His body brushed mine as he reached. I didn't move. "Smells good," he said. "It's just eggs," I murmured. "No," he said. "It's more than that." That afternoon, I gardened. He came out and offered to help. We didn't speak much, but he worked beside me, hands deep in soil, sweat at his collar. He handed me tools when I needed them before I asked. When we stood to stretch, he wiped his forehead with the back of his wrist. "Hot," he said. "It gets heavy in this part of the yard," I replied. He looked at me. I didn't understand what he was thinking, only that it wasn't small. That evening, I sat on the porch, watching dusk settle in again. The breeze was gentle. The light was kind. Aaron came out with 2 glasses. He handed me one without a word. We sat together, shoulders not touching, but closer than usual. He didn't look at me, and yet I felt seen. "It's strange," he said after a long silence. "What is?" "How long it takes us to realize we've been missing something." I didn't ask what he meant, because I knew. Later, when I stood to go to bed, he touched my hand. Just once. Just enough. "Good night," I whispered. His eyes held mine. "Sleep well." But there was something else in the way he said it. A promise. Or a warning. I couldn't tell which. I went to my room. I lay in the dark. I waited. And when the floor creaked beneath slow, familiar steps, I didn't pretend to be asleep. The door didn't creak. That's what I remember most. It opened like it had been waiting. Quietly. Without guilt. I felt him before I saw him. The air shifted. My skin prickled before a sound reached me. Something ancient in me recognized presence, heat, intention. The room held its breath. I didn't move. My eyes were open in the dark. My body was still, but everything inside was alert, like the tide pulling back before a wave. Moonlight poured through the curtains in a pale ribbon. It cut across the foot of the bed, reaching up toward where I lay. He stepped closer, and the light didn't touch him. He moved like someone who had already made peace with the moment. No hesitation. No bravado. Just quiet purpose. When he stood beside the bed, he didn't speak. His breath was slow, measured. We were both listening to the silence between us. His fingers brushed the blanket. Not me. Just the edge, as if asking, "Will this be real? Will you stop me?" I didn't speak. My breath did not quicken. But my hand moved ever so slightly. Not to guide, not to invite. Just to answer. I didn't resist. The mattress dipped gently. I felt the shift of weight, the warmth of a body drawing closer. His hand hovered above my wrist, then lowered. Featherlight. A single point of contact. My eyes fluttered closed, not from sleep, but from surrender. The moment didn't need words. It filled every wall, every gap in the air. Time slowed to breath, to skin, to tension that unraveled without violence. He didn't rush. Every movement was deliberate, careful, like he was trying not to wake the world. But I was already wide awake. There was no claim, no dominance, only rhythm. Breath meeting breath, stillness folding into warmth. I dissolved. All the years of silence, the weight of restraint, the decades of being proper, composed, invisible. They fell away in that slow, unlit hour. They melted against the shape of a man who asked for nothing, but gave back something I had forgotten I could feel. He stayed beside me for a long time. Neither of us spoke. And when he finally rose carefully, quietly, the room felt both smaller and wider. The door clicked closed behind him. But the moment didn't end. It stayed with me. And I didn't sleep. Victor came home with the sunrise. I heard the car before I saw it. I was already in the kitchen, pouring tea I didn't plan to drink. My hair was tied back. My sweater smelled faintly of rosemary from the garden. He walked through the door and stopped. Looked at me for too long. "You're up early," he said. "I've been up a while." He set down his bag, took off his coat. "Place looks the same," he noted. "It is the same." He didn't sit right away. He looked toward the stairs. "He's still here?" "No. Left last night." That sound carried more weight than a full sentence. He joined me at the table, took a sip of tea and winced. "Too strong," he said. "You always say that," I replied. He opened the paper, pretended to read. But he wasn't really reading. I looked at the window. The morning outside was gray. Light rain brushed the glass. "He seems different," Victor said finally. "He's older now. He watched you a lot." I didn't answer. He turned a page he hadn't read. Then, almost casually, I invited him to stay again. "Next month." My eyes met his. "Did you?" "Said he could help me in the yard. Build that fence you keep asking about." I said nothing, but my stomach turned. Not from fear. Not from shame. From knowing. He wasn't asking for permission. He was watching. Testing, measuring the cracks. The rest of that week passed in fragments. Victor grew quiet. More so than usual. Not angry. Just tuned out. Like someone waiting for the right moment to decide what version of the truth he believed in. I didn't press. I moved through the house, as I always had. But I was no longer the same. My reflection betrayed me. I caught it in the hallway mirror one evening. The way I stood straighter. The way color had returned to my cheeks. The way my eyes didn't drift anymore when I looked at myself. This wasn't guilt. This was awareness. This was awakening. A week later, an envelope appeared in the mailbox. No stamp. No name. Just folded cream paper. I opened it with fingers that didn't shake. Inside, one line written in sharp black ink. "You remembered yourself." That's all I wanted. No signature. No need. I sat with it for a long time. Then I placed it inside my journal, between pages that hadn't been touched in over a decade. And I smiled. Not because of what had happened, but because of what had awakened. This isn't about seduction, or betrayal, or punishment. This is a moment that split my life into before and after. I had been a wife. I had been a mother. I had been careful. But now I was aware. Not of him, but of me. And I will not go back. The garden will still bloom. The kettle will still boil. Victor will still sigh behind his paper. But I will walk through these same rooms like a woman reborn. Because for one silent night, I remembered. And I will never unremember it again.